Okay, here we see a set of spark plugs from a 2012 BMW, and this is actually the V8 in the X5. Now I noticed that they call it the 5.0i, but what happens is that's not true. It's really 4.4 liters. But here we see these are original equipment plugs. These are at approximately 82,000 miles, and as you can see, I have considerable ash there on the porcelain insulator. And what's that ash coming from? It's coming from, of course, burning oil. Now, this engine, as BMW states, can use, from brand new supposedly, 1 quart of oil every 1,000 miles. And by the way, the engine holds 9 quarts. And it gives you a warning that it's low on oil when it's below 7 quarts. So when you get the low oil warning, that means it's time to add 2 quarts. And of course we're using the full synthetic 5W40 synthetic oil that BMW recommends. Now this V8 engine is what's called a hot V8. That's because the twin turbochargers, one turbocharger for 4 cylinders, is actually located between the cylinder heads, where the intake manifold would normally be for a conventional V8, and the intake manifolds are down on the sides of the engine. They're bolted to the cylinder heads, normally where the exhaust manifolds would be. Now this is a very powerful engine, runs very smooth, quite the performance package. Unfortunately, BMW's had some issues with it, and one thing is this, is that here I'm replacing plugs because of a misfire on 2 cylinders. Under load, yes, it flashes over and misfires on 2 cylinders and goes into a type of limp-in where it shuts off fuel delivery to the cylinders that misfired in an effort to protect the catalytic converter. And we have, of course, 2 sophisticated catalysts there right in the area between the 2 cylinder heads, right there with the turbine housings of the turbochargers. Now the electrode, of course, is a double platinum, so it's not electrode wear that we're replacing the spark plug. It's because of the material on the porcelain insulator. Now obviously I wasn't missing on all 8 cylinders, so here we see one that's a little cleaner, but you can definitely see as I reorient the spark plug the difference there. Obviously I'm adjusting a little oil between the intake valve guide and stem of the intake valve. Now obviously I need a little bit of oil for lubrication. An excessive amount, of course, results in usage there of motor oil. And of course you want to, with a vehicle like this, you want to make sure you use the recommended oil. Full synthetic 5W40. No other fault codes, just misfiring on 2 cylinders. They have to be number 5 and number 8. And it's kind of interesting on this engine, the way it's set up is on the passenger side it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the driver's side is 5, 6, 7, 8. So obviously 5 and 8 seem to be the problem child, but I can see that I had deposits on all of the insulators. As I said, these plugs were in there for about 82,000 miles. Going back, I went back with the exact same part number, the Bosch plug. One thing that happens when you work on this engine, you're going to require a special spark plug socket. It's actually a 14 millimeter 12 point, and it must be very thin walled. I ended up purchasing one from Snap-on, and I got another one there, European design, online. Without that socket, no way. Even if you take a conventional 12 point 14 millimeter socket, 3/8 inch drive, what you'll find is the wall is too thick. It will not go between the spark plug and the well of the cylinder head. Quite tight there, not much space. Now this is the special socket that's required to remove these plugs on a BMW. Now you'll notice that the socket has a very, very thin wall. Take a look at that. Very thin wall. Has a very nice rubber retainer to retain the insulator of the spark plug in the socket. And I like it because it doesn't grip too hard. I actually lubricated a little bit with silicone grease. So it comes right out. Notice that this is Snap-on's version of the socket. I like this because if I position the extension correctly, it has relief there for the spring-loaded retaining ball on the extension, so it holds pretty well. So I'm able to pull the socket off without the extension coming loose. In fact, it's kind of tight in here. I think I could have reached the needle nose pliers, but it's kind of a nuisance. The idea is you want an extension that's going to retain the socket. Lubricate the rubber retainer so that it lets go of the spark plug relatively easily. And of course I'm lubricating it with the silicone grease, the same thing that I'm going to put on the spark plug insulator boots there on the coils as I install them. Nothing wrong with the coils on this one, just the plugs fouling. And if it took 82,000 miles for them to foul, well, then I probably got another 82,000 to go.